airtight set of gifts. He is someone who has a heart for the people of God, a heart for the ministry, and certainly a mind for it too. So with no further hesitation, oscillation, vacillation, or procrastination, I'd like to introduce to some and reintroduce to others my brother, Amos, the youth pastor of Providence Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome him as he comes.
Thank you. Thank you. Let us pray. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Passage of scripture found in Amos chapter 7, verse 8. First part of verse 8 reads, "The Lord said to me, Amos, what do you see?" I began wearing glasses in the first grade, and I dreaded wearing them because they looked like the ones Steve Urkel wore on Family Matters. Not to mention I would take on the alias Four Eyes. I never taunted anyone as a child and did not expect to be taunted. However, my sight had me in a position where I could not see clearly and needed to obtain help to know how bad my sight really was. Sight is the power or faculty of seeing. It's the perception of objects by use of the eye.
Yes.
Sight is also defined and known as vision. There are many people, such as myself, that use aids to enhance their sight. Just take a moment and look around the room. You will see a variety of frames. And for those with bare faces, excluding those of you with 20/20 vision, have shielded your eyes with the lens referred to as contacts. Science has determined that humans have multiple senses, and a sense is a physiological capacity of organisms that provides data for perception. The five senses we most recognize are hearing, taste, smell, touch, and sight. We call the inability to see blindness. Blindness may result from damage to the eyeball, especially to the retina, damage to the optic nerve that connects each eye to the brain, or from a stroke. It is also known that poisons or medications can cause temporary or permanent blindness. People who are blind from degradation or damage to the visual cortex but still have functional eyes are actually capable of some level of vision and reaction to visual stimuli, but not a conscious perception. This is known as blind sight. People with blind sight are usually not aware that they are reacting to visual sources and instead unconsciously adapt their behavior to the stimulus.
My Lord.
The story is told of a blind girl who hated herself because she was blind. She hated everyone except for her loving boyfriend because he was always there for her. She said that if she could only see the world, she would marry him. One day, someone donated a pair of eyes to her, and now she could see everything, including her boyfriend. She was asked by her boyfriend, "Now that you can see the world, will you marry me?" The girl was in shock when she saw that he was blind too, and refused to marry him. The boyfriend walked away in tears, and later wrote a letter to her saying, "My dear, just take care of my eyes."
Wow.
In our text, the Lord asked Amos, "What do you see?" Amos has no record of being blind, but rather he was used as a visual aid to relay God's perception of and to the people of Israel. Amos, whose name means burden bearer, one who does not have a superlative pedigree, is listed as a minor prophet in the sacred text and stands third among the 12. He comes from the southern kingdom of Judah, specifically from the town of Tekoa, a town in the hill country about 5 miles from Bethlehem and 12 miles south of Jerusalem, overlooking the hill country, the wilderness rather, of Judah. Amos was not a prophet, neither was he born the son of a prophet. As a matter of fact, he was a herdsman and a dresser of sycamore trees. One day the Lord took Amos away from tending the flock and said to him, "Go and prophesy to my people Israel." Scholars have no record as it pertains to the preparation of his call. The only thing we know is that God chose the simple to confound the wise. There was no licensing service, ordination, or consecration, just a simple call by God that elevated him from a herdsman to a prophet. God not only chose, but also sent this simple man named Amos to let people know that God is still in charge.
Yeah.
Amos had no doubt or uncertainty about the character of God. Time has well acquainted him with the history and traditions of his nation, allowing him to reflect upon these things and realize their significance. The Lord told Amos to go and prophesy, not knowing that his prophecies would primarily address the northern kingdom of Israel. He appeared in Bethel, which means house of God, without reason as to why his mission was in the northern capital. All he knew was that prophets appeared where they are needed most. The northern kingdom had come out victorious from war and reached this culmination of wealth and power with the attendant results of luxury in excess, while the southern kingdom had been enjoying a period of outward tranquility and domestic content. In the 7th chapter of his book, Amos tells me of 3 visions. I asked Amos to tell me about those visions. He says the first vision was a vision of locusts. And it was with this vision that God formed a swarm of locusts to devour the crop after the king took his share of the first crop. And then the second crop began to grow. If you want a picture of this in your mind, 1963, Alfred Hitchcock directed the movie entitled The Birds. Also in this vision, the locusts would eat up all the crops in the land, resulting in a famine. But Amos begged God. He interceded for the people of Israel to forgive them, but the text says that God changed his mind. The second vision was a vision of fire. Here God called for fire to come down like rain, one so intense to dry up the deep water and burn the land. The second time Amos pleads to God and shouts, "Stop," for God to hold his hand on the wrath of Israel. And again, the Lord changed his mind. The third is the vision of the plumb line. Amos says, I saw the Lord standing by a straight wall with a plumb line in his hand. Those of you that don't know what a plumb line is, I went to the effort of going to Home Depot. And this is what they use when they're building. They hold it against the wall, and if it stands straight, then the object that it's against is straight. But if the object is leaning like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, there's some trouble in the land.
Wow.
Amos saw God standing by a wall with a plumb line in his hand. And the Lord said to me, Amos, what do you see?
My Lord.
I want to stop right here and say his personal address to me should remind us of how well the Lord knows us.
My goodness.
He told Amos, I know you by name. Paul tells us, I know the Lord knows those who are his. It doesn't matter how many names we have or how many aliases we may have. God knows exactly who we are. The Lord said to me, Amos, what do you see? I said, a plumb line. The Lord said, I will put a plumb line among my people Israel to show them how crooked they are. I will not look the other way any longer. At some point, God has to judge sin, and intercession won't be heard. God told Jeremiah not to pray or cry out for these people because I will not listen to you. And here we see Amos in the same predicament. God is standing on a straight wall with a plumb line in his hand. The plumb line is a long cord with a lead at one end, used by builders to ensure that a wall is properly vertical. If the plumb line does not hang straight down next to the wall is tilted and will have to be torn down and rebuilt. God's plumb line would show that the nation of Israel was not upright. But after reading about Amos, the Lord had a talk with me and said, Matthew, what do you see? I said, Lord, I see a nation provoking God to wrath because of its political and economic structure.
My Lord.
Matthew, what do you see? I see a nation defective as regards to both righteousness and justice. I see terrorists taking the lives of thousands of Iraqi civilians in order to have power and control.
Right.
I see new sanctions being put on North Korea as a result of hacking Sony through cyber vandalism. Matthew, what do you see? I see tragic deaths in the persons of Tamar Rice, Michael Brown, and Eric Gardner, and to 2 NYPD officers. Matthew, what do you see? I see mass protests that broke out in Ferguson, Missouri, after there was no indictment made.
What do you see?
I see a criminal justice system that is deeply flawed in favor of one above the other. And we try to say it's human rights when it's really a deal of racism.
My Lord.
Matthew, what do you see? I see churches like Bethel and preachers like Amos that are supposed to have the Spirit of God but get concerned with power and influence. I told you earlier that Bethel means house of God, but like here in this text, the houses of God have been turned to the king's house.
Yeah.
Preachers are concerned about their status and their ministries. Threatened by young preachers that go to seminary because their message is too strong for their ministry. It's too attractive,
Wow.
drawing too much attention away from me.
Wow.
Matthew, what do you see? I see a dying world in the hands of the enemy. And God is standing against the nation of America with a plumb line in his hand.
Yes.
Because we have gone away from the foundations of this world. But as I close, I'm reminded of a hymn that says, "Be not dismayed,
Whatever.
whatever betide,
Yeah.
because God will take care of you. Beneath his wings of love abide,
My.
God will take care of you." But let me not stop there, because as preachers, as young preachers, God has called us from our various professions. I didn't go to school to be a preacher. I went to school as a businessman. But God called me to be a prophet. He called me out of the shepherd's field, from being a dresser of sycamore tree, to go tell my story. Hymn 160 of the Old National Baptist Hymn Book says, "Throw out the lifeline."
Yes.
Throw out the lifeline to danger-fraught men, seeking in anguish where you've never been. Winds of temptation and billows of woe will soon hurl them out where the darkness waters flow. Throw out the lifeline. Someone is drifting away. Throw out the lifeline. Throw out the lifeline. Someone is sinking today. But as I go to my seat, he says, the hymn writer says in another hymn, that he's my everything. He says that some folk worship money and luxury it brings. Some folk live for glory and hear their praises ring.
Yeah.
But I live for Jesus, and to him I cling. Jesus is my everything. Oh, he's my everything. Young preachers, there's a question asked before us today, and the question is asked, what do you see? Will you be bold enough, like Amos, to tell what you see? Or will you be like Amaziah, trying to hold your position?
My goodness.
What do